Hi, welcome to the Israel First television program from our studios in Jerusalem. Cold and wet, but you usually expect it to be full of sunshine and camels. And in the studio today, we have a special guest, Aryeh Green. Thank you so much, Aryeh, coming across. Really appreciate us having the time with you, and you're really going to enjoy that. Aryeh is going to be talking about his new book, My Israel Trail, Finding Peace in the Promised Land. And he's been in the news, you've been in the Jerusalem Post, and what you don't know is that Aryeh for many years was actually behind the scenes in MediaCentral. You were the director there, and Aryeh, you're originally from Washington, although you were brought up in San Francisco. He's a business executive. He was previously an advisor to Natan Sharansky and the Israeli Prime Minister's office. As I say, you were a director at MediaCentral, and I'm just going to mention that very briefly before we talk about the book. He's the author of this new book, My Israel Trail, Finding Peace in the Promised Land, and is currently the Chief Strategic Officer at EnergiyaGlobal, providing solar power to Africa. He's spoken on CBN News, I24 News, Israel Talk News, and has been featured in Breaking Israel News and the Jerusalem Post. So thank you so much for coming in to talk about your new book. And very interesting, because for many years you actually were the other side of the news, helping journalists. You for many years were working at the MediaCentral. You still are a kind of an executive director at MediaCentral, doing a fantastic work. The office is based in the center of Jerusalem, and you have journalists from all over the world, and you help them to find sources. You help them to you take them to where the news is happening, and doing an amazing work at MediaCentral. And it's a great resource. And we, Natalie and I, appreciate your help and the help of MediaCentral over many years with different things you've helped us with. And thank you.
Thank you.
So, from somebody who's working with journalists, who's been working in the government, who's normally in business, suddenly you decide to write a book. You go from being someone who helps writers to somebody who is an author and a writer. It's
true. It was a very, very different experience, that's for sure. I've never written a book before.
So it's your first book? And even before, people are going to ask, the first question you're asking at home is, how can they get the book? How, Aryeh, is it on Amazon, or where can they get the book?
Sure, it's on Amazon, and my publisher also, US publisher, distributes it to most major bookstores, Barnes & Noble, and many others. But I suppose the easiest way is via Amazon or the Book Depository or other online sources. There's also a website which people can go to, myisraeltrail.com, pretty basic, for more information.
So from going, as I say, from being someone who helps journalists and in business, you decided two things. You decided not only to do the trail, which is it's an amazing book and tells you all about the Israel Trail, but you actually decided to chronicle it, because that was a job as well. You not only had to do the trail, but you had to make notes, and that must have been, you had to be very disciplined to do that.
Well, the truth is, Martin, I didn't set out to write a book. My hiking on the trail, as you know, was a result of a personal challenge that I was facing at the time. And I set out on the trail, and I did keep a journal. That much, I have often in different times in my life kept a journal, especially when traveling through Europe as a student and other times, going through different changes in my life. So I did start on the very first night of the trail in my tent, when it was, speaking of rain, which it is outside now in the hills of Jerusalem, there in the hills of Eilat. I was very grateful that I schlepped along with me this one-person tent, which added, 2.5 kilos, 5 pounds to my backpack, which I wasn't sure I would really need. And the very first night I set up the tent, and because it was raining in the hills of Eilat, which is maybe one day a year it gets any real rain there. But I remember sitting in the tent, and I wrote a few notes in my journal, but it wasn't with an eye or an anticipation of writing a book. It was just, as you say, to kind of chronicle some of the elements of the trip, both the physical aspects of what I was experiencing, and also the emotional and psychological issues I was dealing with, and some of the contemplation, some of the reflections I had. So yeah, I did. I can't say I was that disciplined, just for the record. It wasn't every night. I mean, by the time, after 12, 14 hours of, 12 to 15 miles of hiking with a 50-pound pack on my back, and I did this, remember, at age 51, not age 21, which is the normal cohort of the people who hike the trail here in Israel. I didn't always have the energy to write in my journal.
What I like about the book is it's very, I was going to say it's a humanity, it's a personal book. You share a lot of personal issues, but what I like about it is it's very relatable to you. Can, some of the funny things that happen to you, it's very relatable to, and I like that because, a lot of books that come out are good, but you can't relate to them. There's nothing, it's just information really. But what I liked about My Israel Trail was that it's, you share very personal things, and I think that will help a lot of people, that are going through different issues, and that it will really help them. Now, my first question really is that, have you done hiking before, or did you need special equipment? Did you go on a course, or because you were it's something like 600 miles or something?
Yep.
And that with a heavy backpack, yep, over in areas where there's nobody. So had you done any preparation for this?
I'm laughing because the answer doesn't reflect very well on me. I mean, I'm a mature, relatively experienced hiker, but no, I've never done a trek like this. And my experience in hiking has been day hikes, maybe a 1 or maximum 2 night overnight backpacking in the high Sierras when I was a kid or a college student or a camp counselor. I mean, living here in Israel, that it's part of the Israeli culture to go out on day hikes, to explore the land, and especially the historical and religious and spiritual significance of that. I went on day tours with all 3 of my children at least twice a year, going through the Israeli education system, because that's part of the culture. So experience in hiking, yes, I had. Experience in trekking with this 50-pound, did I mention it was a 50-pound pack on my back? This idea of a trek with the physical challenge that was involved. I laughed at the beginning of answering your question because the answer is really no. I went on one day, I put some rocks in a bag, about 50 pounds worth of rocks, and went for a 12-mile hike around my hometown of Beit Shemesh, which is kind of some rolling hills, so there's some ascents and descents, just to make sure I could more or less manage what I was anticipating doing. But I know I didn't do any, didn't take a course. I read a little bit. I sat with a friend, in fact, the daughter of a friend, but she's also a friend, is my kid's age, who had just done the shvil, the Hebrew word for the trail, and she went through my pack with me and threw away, a few things that she said I wouldn't need necessarily, that were going to weigh me down. But I'm sure that you came across, as you perused the book, a few references which I said to myself, what the heck are you doing? What are you trying to prove? This is impossible. You're going to hurt yourself.
Now, you decided to go from south to north. Is that the way the trek is normally done, or?
So there are 2 seasons to hike the Israel Trail, because the summer in Israel is so very hot, as you know. One is starting in the south in the February, March, kind of late winter, early springtime, and ending in the north, and the other is in the fall, September, October time, starting in the north and then heading south, so that you miss out the heat of the summer, but also you're not caught in the rain in the north in the winter. I was caught in the rain and even hail a number of times in March, somewhat unusually in the Jerusalem hills. But what I did was somewhat unusual, recommended by the author of the Red Guide, the kind of semi-official, not really official, but
so there's a guide to walking.
There's a guide to walking that tells you what you do every day, and where you turn left, and where the different signs are, and where you can resupply, and some of the history of some of the things that you see. And the author of the Red Guide, Yaakov Sar, who's become a friend, and I have my criticisms of him.
I was going to say, there's some interesting comments about the Red Guide.
Indeed, but it is a tremendous resource and incredibly helpful. And he recommends, for people who hike in the season I did, for people who get to the middle of the country, Tel Aviv or thereabouts, to jump up to the north and start heading south from the border with Lebanon, specifically so as not to miss out on the critical 2 or 3 week period where the blossoming of the spring flowers is so just beautiful there in the north. And so I adopted that idea less for the blossoms themselves and more because since I live in the middle of the country, it meant that by jumping from the middle around Jerusalem up to the border with Lebanon, then hiking south from there, I actually finished my hike by walking home, by physically walking off the trail about 10 kilometers into my hometown. And for me, that was psychologically important in terms of finishing my trek. It was also more convenient for my friends and family to meet me at the end of the trail there than having to go up to the border with Lebanon near Kiryat Shmona and Metula in order to meet me and welcome me home.
And there was quite a, you're retracing history really because of, the Jewish people and the coming from Egypt and all this. You must have felt you're walking in the footsteps of your forefathers, and that must have been an incredible experience.
You put it exactly right. I felt repeatedly in the course of the trek, and I mean, not only in the desert, but specifically in the desert, that I was walking I was like the children of Israel wandering in the wilderness, even if it wasn't exactly the same places, but there were other places where I really did feel that. In the Judean desert, I don't know if you know, many people don't know that the largest nature reserve in Israel is called the Judean Desert Nature Reserve. Did you know that?
No.
Most people don't know that. And even you and I who live here, most people don't know it. Why is that? Because there's nothing there.
Wow.
Seriously. In the desert you have rock formations in different colors, and you have shrubs, and you have
so
birds.
when you're actually there and you're looking at this expanse of just rocks and a bit like a moonscape, really, is that hard on the eye? Is that because there's nothing for miles? And how do you know you're going straight? You obviously had a compass, I guess.
Well, I didn't actually I had one, but I didn't use it at all, the compass. The trail itself is very well signposted.
Right.
Which isn't to say I didn't lose the trail half a dozen times every day, because that one does. But
I think you were in the dark. I read that you were in the dark.
I definitely had a few days where I miscalculated. You talked about preparations, and I may be smart, but I'm not that smart. So I forgot to look at heights and elevations, or I didn't realize how difficult the day would be. I ended up walking in the dark. It's true, but the trail signs are relatively well marked.
Right.
But in the Judean desert, that nothingness, that moonscape, as you very accurately describe it, it was very interesting because, first of all, the Judean desert is where King David fled from King Saul.
Right.
It's where Jesus walked. It's where the many prophets of Israel wandered. And there's a reason for that, because the nothingness that's there is almost liberating, because you're not distracted by birds or beetles or flies or shrubs or color or even changes in the contours of the landscape. It's just this massive expanse of light brown and black rock in kind of gently rolling hills. And it almost frees you from all these distractions to contemplate your place in the universe, or God, or
I was going to ask you
rest.
about this. Was the trek, was it a bit like living off-grid? What they call now, which is where people will, they go away and live in a cabin or in a forest, or they'll just kind of, especially in the United States, if you're watching in the States, off-grid. Was it something like that?
Very much so. And it was also purposeful for me. I was getting over my divorce, a divorce that I hadn't looked for. It was extremely painful for me. And one of the reasons I set out on the trek was to have this time alone. And I did log out of my email, Facebook, what have you, and to a certain extent, although it was a bit disconcerting that nobody needed me. My grown children didn't need me. My office, MediaCentral, didn't need me. I had set up mechanisms that the world didn't need me, could live without me for a while, as the song by Shlomo Artzi says, one of my favorites, that the world can get along without me for a while. But that was also liberating. it engendered a sense of humility in me and modesty that, I'm not that important, apparently. But that off-grid, as you describe it, was part of the experience, especially the first 3 weeks in the desert, without question. And it was wonderful.
And I think we're so dependent on our lifestyle, of being connected with computers and cell phones and email, and the rush, especially at this time of the year, as we're in the studio with the holidays, and there's this sense of everything has to be in a certain way, but when you're there, you're liberated in the sense that you don't have any responsibility in one way other than to move forward. And I guess that was responsibility, that you had to do a certain amount of the trail each day.
Well, certainly in terms of the desert experience, there's no question. You have to plan well because you have to resupply. You need water. You have to have 5 liters of water a day.
How did you cope? Because, I mean, if you don't have water, that's very serious.
Oh, no, it's very dangerous.
Right.
People die, without question. So there were a number of places where I actually buried water and supplies to be waiting for me as I drove
further
down.
up the trail.
That's right. There are other places that are inaccessible to a normal person with a normal car, so I paid a desert tour guide who makes sure that there's a stash of water in particular places. Sometimes it was like being in a James Bond situation where, he had given me instructions. You follow the creek bed to here, and you go left at the small shrub and right at the tall tree and climb this embankment, and that's where you'll find the water. And a few times it wasn't there, twice.
It was stolen?
Stolen, or people, or he had miscalculated because people he had sent there previously had taken more than they. And one of the things you pay for, and you pay an arm and a leg for 6 bottles of water, which would normally cost, 20 shekels or $5 in the store, and you pay $50 for those 6 bottles of water. But what you're paying for is the guarantee that it will be there. Right. And one time I had to hike 45 minutes out of my way to the top of a hill to get cell phone reception at 11 at night to tell him the water's not there. Right. And he came out in his Jeep at 2 in the morning because it's that important. Wow. So that's one of the answers.
And then with food, obviously you can't carry
you can carry enough
food?
I carried enough for 2 or 3 days at a time. Right. I happen to be vegetarian, so I ate a lot of quinoa, a lot of instant oatmeal, and granola bars and what have you.
So did you carry cooking equipment? Did you have
sure, yeah. It's a very small... from REI, I'm happy to give REI a plug because they've been terrific, including replacing my air mattress, which didn't work, unfortunately. After the trail they replaced it, but at least I give them credit for that. But yeah, I had the smallest possible single-person cooking stove. Right. Which is
like a gas stove?
It's a gas stove with, it's maybe this size or twice this size, a little gas stove that has a little tripod it sits on, and a little pot that I used for coffee and tea and oatmeal and quinoa, and I carried a little thing of spices with me to make life interesting.
No, you carried this heavy backpack with all the equipment in. I mean, how did you cope with that? Did you have days when you thought, well, can't I leave it? Can't I leave it, or send it on and pick it up?
You mean like every day? Where I asked myself, what are you doing, and what am I trying to prove? Because I wasn't out to do like a challenge course, and I have to say I've been very fortunate. I've ridden bikes around the Jerusalem foothills for the last 20 years, certainly once a week and sometimes twice a week. So I was in decent shape, not great shape. I mean, I'm over 50 and it shows, but decent shape. So stamina-wise and general body strength, I was lucky enough. I didn't have issues with blisters or real significant back pains, what have you. But my shoulders and back and legs and knees and calves and thighs and every other muscle you can imagine ached at the end of most days. Wow. But I managed, and of course, over the course of the 8 weeks, I wanted to patent a new weight loss regime called the Israel Trail Diet. Go on the Israel Trail, hike 600-700 miles in 8 weeks, lose 8 kilos, which is maybe 20 pounds over the course of those 8 weeks. My kids said that, no, there's probably easier ways, Daddy, for people to lose 20 pounds. But I did, and I got in better shape. And the truth is, the last 4 weeks, from the north down to the south, the second half, I carried a little guitar. instead of just enjoying...
As well as your bag and...
No, instead of enjoying the fact that I didn't need to have 5 liters of water on me every day because it was no longer desert and I could resupply every day and you don't need the same amount of water. Instead of just enjoying that, I brought with me a small kind of 3/4 size guitar that I had bought specifically for the trail, which was a lot of fun.
If you're watching today and you're interested in walking the trail, is it something practical, or is it people have to take a bit of wisdom here and, you know?
Well, that's...
because did you find other people who were doing the trail who maybe shouldn't have been doing the trail, or?
There's one story I relate to in the book about a Scandinavian woman who I met coming towards me on the trail at one point, who literally had flown in, got off the plane, came to this point. It was her first day. She had a pack that was too big for her. Not that I'm an expert, but you could just see that. Too big and too heavy, and she had no idea where she was going, and I was a bit surprised. That's a level of irresponsibility that even I can't really understand, but
so
yes.
Be wise, don't come to Israel with a backpack and hope for the best.
Right, but on the other hand, no, I want to say, yes, people can. It's true for the Appalachian Trail or other hiking trails. There's no question that people can come to Israel as part of an itinerary of exploring the Holy Land and enjoy a day hike or a 2 or 3 day hike or take a week on the trail, and people do that. I met people on the trail.
Right, you don't have to do the whole
of course
whole
not.
thing.
It's actually, the Israel Trail is a compilation of day hikes plus a little bit more in order to connect them where it was necessary. But I met people on the trail, age 70, age 75, 80, groups of retired people, obviously young people, who were doing the trail either a few days at a time over the course of a number of months, or once a month for a day here and a day there. It takes them 3-4 years to complete the trail. And people do it, usually people do it together with others. I was a little bit unusual in doing it all by myself.
Yeah, you did it by yourself, yeah. Was that a purposeful, you made that decision, or it was just how the circumstances were?
Oh no, it was without question a decision. I needed time to be on my own. And that I think one of the reasons that the trail itself was so transformative to me, and one of the reasons that I did write the book, as you said, I learned so many interesting lessons from the physical hiking that were then applicable to the effort I needed to make to achieve the personal healing that I was looking for after this devastating divorce, and learning a sense of acceptance, being on the side of a cliff and recognizing nobody's going to save me. I have to figure out how to get out of here. This is where I am. Accept this and figure out what the next steps are. That was obviously immediately applicable to the situation I found myself in. I'm divorced, never expected that to happen, and saying to myself, Aryeh, you have to accept this and figure out ways to move forward. Those lessons of humility and acceptance, forgiveness, which was the hardest lesson for me to learn, were part and parcel of my experience, and I could never have achieved that if I was hiking with a group of friends and chatting, along the way, and not experiencing this loneliness and aloneness.
So it was like being alone in the wilderness.
It very much was.
Right.
It really was.
Wow. Now, one of the things that people will ask about is the security issue, because it's the promised land, the Holy Land, beautiful, but there's there's a lot of issues really, but one of them I'm particularly thinking of is that, and something that you've dealt with at MediaCentral, when you go into other areas of Israel, not everybody is so happy to see you, and there's terrorism, and there's that issue. There's also the issue of wild animals. I have seen snake when I've been in the area where our studio is. I've seen snakes on the road. So, how did you deal with these different issues of security?
The security side, as opposed to safety and animals, which we can come back to, the security side, actually, I'm very pleased to share with you that there's never been any sort of physical attack, terror, or a robbery or anything like that, a mugging or what have you, on the Israel National Trail. There's never been, there should never be, but over the years, it's very safe in that regard. There is one small issue of, unfortunately, there is some theft, especially from large groups, where people sneak in and take their wallets or cameras at night. But the truth is, I was never worried for my security from that respect. The trail itself goes through the Negev, through the coastal plain, the hills up to Jerusalem, and through the Galilee. It does go through Arab villages. It goes through areas where Bedouin shepherds are taking their flocks, and I have walked by numerous times different Bedouin tents, what have you. Nothing but positive experiences. Wow. Every person I met on the trail, people coming along in a Jeep, on a Jeep tour, tourists, young Israelis, older, Bedouin shepherds who call out to me, "Hey, are you doing the trail?" Say, "Yep, I'm doing the trail." They say, "Kol hakavod, good for you." And that was an experience in Arab Muslim villages, Mashsadeh, I think it's called, up near Mount Tabor, where I had a specific experience with children waving and clapping as I walked through. I was hiking with a flag on the back of my backpack, which is kind of the done thing if you're hiking the Israel Trail. It's the not so subtle sign that I'm not just the day hiker here, I'm doing the trail, and people are very, very supportive. So the security side was not a concern to me at all.
Then on the other side,
the animals,
there were, I mean, the snake, the possibility of a. Do hikers register with when you do the trail?
No,
you know,
there's no formal registry, not like in the National Parks Service in America where you have to get a hiker's permit and therefore there's some. No, there's nothing formal.
Would you advise people more to go in groups or?
You know, it depends on the person and the situation. First of all, I don't feel I can advise, you know, in a general way. I would advise everybody to hike the trail, either in a group or individually, obviously depending on an individual's capacity and their interest or their need, what kind of experience they're looking for. I certainly would not hesitate to recommend hiking the trail, including doing it alone. And I'm available. I have a website. People are welcome to reach out to me.
That's on the screen now.
And I'm certainly very happy to.
They're going to have to look at you're going to have to get the book and to learn more about. There's so much more in the book, though, isn't it? Because you go through your story on a day-by-day basis, and so they can learn so much from it. So get the book. My Israel Trail. Thank you so much, Aryeh, for coming in today. It's been really good to have you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Appreciate that. Don't forget you can email us at info@israelfirst.org. Visit the website www.israelfirst.org. And remember, we're the program that looks at the land, the people, and the language.